The process of buying and selling a home is one of the most strenuous and frustrating out there. Imagine this, you find a home and make an offer, but that home already has multiple bids. So, after a long bidding war, you finally get the home of your dreams. But now, after a clean inspection, the appraisal falls through and you ask yourself, why is this so frustrating? Wong and Opendoor asked that same question. And on this episode of IT Visionaries, Ian discusses how his team built one of the biggest disruptors to the real estate market. And he gives some of the secret sauce to the science behind the Opendoor technology. Enjoy this episode. IT Visionaries is created by the team at mission.org and brought to you by the Salesforce Customer 360 platform, the #1 cloud platform for digital transformation of every experience. Build connected experience, empower every employee, and deliver continuous innovation with the customer at the center of everything you do. Learn more at salesforce.com/platform. This podcast is created by the team at mission.org.
Welcome to another episode of IT Visionaries. I'm Ian Faison, host of IT Visionaries. And today we are joined by special guest, another Ian. Ian, how's it going?
I'm doing well. Am I the other Ian or are you the other Ian?
Yeah, it's a great question. And it's a question I ask myself all the time. But in this case, for sure, I am the other Ian. Well, we're going to get into, besides our, talking about the greatest name in the world and how it gets confused for LAN whenever you get a Uber or Lyft. We're going to talk about your background in technology, what you're building at Opendoor, and everything in between. So first, how did you get started in technology?
Yeah, so growing up in the 90s, it's hard not to fall in love with tech. I remember seeing just computers getting better on a month-to-month basis. Remember the 386, 486 Pentiums. Video games were being more immersive, and the internet just changed everything. So I went to school studying electrical engineering in college, thinking that EE was the key to the future. But a couple of years into undergrad, realized that I didn't quite like the circuits part of EE, but I really did like the math part of EE. And so I actually stayed on to do my PhD doing research in statistics. And one of the things that was a pivotal moment for me was interning at Facebook as a data scientist. And that's when I realized that industry and academia have completely diverged in terms of what's interesting and impactful. So I dropped out my PhD and joined Squared back in January of 2011 as their first data scientist and got my start in tech. And honestly, the thing that keeps me going is that it feels like every day in tech, you get to build a bit of the future. And it's just really fun and exciting.
So flash forward to today, what does it mean to be CTO of Opendoor?
Yeah, so I am the CTO of Opendoor and I'm one of the co-founders. And so my objective, honestly, is just to help the company be successful. Now, our goal is to transform the industry and make it a lot better for homeowners and home buyers. And my sole mission is to make that happen. But the way that I do that is through three key, different scopes of responsibilities. The first is just to lead our really talented team of engineers and data scientists to build amazing products for our customers. And the second is I focus a lot on the management and build out of our pricing capabilities, which is foundational to the core products. And the third is I collaborate with my executive team to help set overall company strategy and also to build a company that we're proud of and we want to show up to work every day.
And so as CTO, are you working on internal employee processes, working on the product, managing the team, all of the above?
Yeah, it's a really broad ranging role. I feel like the title CTO could mean so many different things in different companies. And to be honest, I've never been a stickler for a title. To me, it's really about how do we create the most impact for the business. So from my seat, I do a mix of absolutely working with my co-founder and CEO, Eric, working with the chief product officer, Tom, to help understand how we can make a better product for homeowners and home shoppers. And also making sure that internal processes are done well for our engineers, making sure they've got a solid career growth path, making sure that with the right set of talent on the team. And then there are some things that I have a more direct hand in, like I mentioned, pricing. So that's where I spend probably more of my, call it kind of technical brain cycles, if you will, really focusing on the set of algorithms that we use to make sure that we're pricing homes accurately when we buy and sell at Opendoor.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like real estate is something that has been, and really just buying a home in general, hasn't really changed that much. Like, obviously, we know more about the the landscape now than ever, and leverage technology to do that. But what did you kind of see as co-founding the company as the clear, obvious issue here?
Yeah, so the premise of the company is that buying and selling a house is probably the single most financially significant decision in people's lives, but it's also one of the most stressful and painful. So if you have a 2x2, and on one axis you look at the size of the transaction, and on the other axis you look at consumer happiness, right? You have this massive outlier where it is a huge transaction, but super fragmented industry and just a stressful and painful experience. So, and if you look at any other asset class, be that cars or clothes or electronics, there's always this ability to sell or buy pretty easily. And so it's glaringly obvious to us back in 2014 when we started the company that something is off with real estate. Ian, if I were to tell you the only way you can sell your car is if you have to do test drives, you have to allow people to do test drives any given weekend for 3 months. There's a 1 in 7 chance you can't sell your car. You have to pay a 6% fee on top of the whole thing. You would say that's absolutely insane. But for some reason, we're okay with that for housing. And so we said, okay, that's a little bit crazy. How do we actually make real estate and the entire ecosystem be in service of homeowners and home shoppers and not the other way around? And so that's really why we started the company about 6 years ago at this point.
Well, you didn't know this, but I recently sold my place and was in the process. So I just sold my condo not too long ago, or at the end of last year, and was in the process of buying a place. And boy, do I know what you are talking about! Because if you live in the sunny San Francisco Bay Area, it's a little tough. Turns out that buying and selling in this market is pretty crazy, and like you said, it's so far out of most people's means at this point that the stress levels are potentially ruinous at every turn. Not to mention all of the houses or many of the houses are 100 years old.
Yeah, I mean, SF Bay Area is just a real snowflake of a market. But honestly, the pain is shared amongst all buyers and sellers in the country. One of the interesting things about real estate is that if you take aside SF in New York and Seattle, it's actually much harder to sell a home. And so for an average homeowner, the home is worth about $240,000. I know that might come as a shock to folks who have been in there for a long time, because I think our average prices at this point is over $1 million. But the average price of a house is $240K. Again, it's going to take a homeowner 3 months to sell a home. There is a 1 in 7 chance of a fall through, and you're paying 6% fee. On top of that, you likely need to unlock the equity in your current home in order to buy your next home. And so there's just a lot of inherent stress and friction in the process today of real estate. And so for those listeners who might not be familiar with Opendoor, we went out with a solution about 6 years ago to help make this a lot easier, starting with the selling side. And so as opposed to listing your home on the market and waiting for 60 to 90 days to be able to sell your home, we can just buy the home from you. So we will literally give you an all-cash offer if you come to opendoor.com. And so you can actually get an offer and sell directly to us whenever you want. And that just makes the selling process like 100 times easier for the homeowner.
I mean, I couldn't be more excited about the possibilities for the future. And I was one of the reasons why we were really excited to have you on the show, other than the fact that you're an Ian, which is even better. But I think that this is one of the classic problems where like every company is a technology company these days. This doesn't feel like a technology problem. And yet there's so much technology under the hood. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, totally. And it's one of the interesting things about working in a very physical and tangible industry is that the tech is actually just woven to everything that we do. So you can almost say that we are a technology company. You can also say that we're an operations company, and of course we're a real estate company. And I also think there's been waves of technology companies. Obviously, you've got the Google and Facebooks of the world of the 2000s, but I really think over the last 5 years, you've seen Mark Andreessen's point about software aiding the world really coming alive for some of these really large industries that so far has been almost impervious to technology changes. And I'm referring to, say, ride sharing, I'm referring to Airbnb, and just like almost different levels of the societal stack are getting disrupted now. And so, yeah, housing, real estate, I mean, tremendously important transaction. There's so much tech that goes behind making that transaction much better. And so I'll give you an example. So some of the really cool tech that we'd have to do is if you come to opendoor.com, right, you're giving us information about you and your home. And so we actually have to master how do we build trust with the consumer in this really drawn out offline, online experience? How do we price the home really accurately? And then how do we actually build a real estate supply chain that historically has been super offline, super clumsy, and make that really efficient? It's almost like building that Amazon warehouse, right? But offline, distributed in every single home across the country. Those are some of the really hard technical challenges that we have to solve every day.
Do you feel like, with the market essentially not really changing for, 100 years? Like, I don't even know, like I don't even know what would be the biggest like change in buying or selling a home. And when I bought my first home 10 years ago, and when I was trying to buy this recent one, not one single thing changed. I think we even used the same broker, like, in a different state and whatever, you know what I mean? It's like, it was almost identical, every single thing, going in and signing the paperwork, like everything. And I think I bought my first time I was in the Army. I was 22. I had no idea what I was doing, but, in something like this where the market has not changed in so long, you're going into, well, I don't know how many markets you're in now. Like 15, 21. Yeah. Okay. I was going to say, 15 to 20 markets. So 21 markets, each market is different. Each city is different. Each street is different. Each house is different. But the process, as you kind of talked about, is the same. It seems like there's so many like process things, the repetition, the hidden fees, all that stuff, that data and transparency can immediately surface, like, right? I mean, that's what's so exciting. I mean, I feel like it's such a black box when you're buying a house. And now to be able to have some level of transparency is a match in the darkness.
Yeah, definitely. I think buying and selling a home, look, the stats, actually, you were 22 when you bought your first home. The average age of a first-time home buyer is actually 32. And the time between transactions, typically somewhere between 7 to 10 years. And so people don't actually get that many revs at it. And as a result, maybe because of that, the industry has been super, super slow to change. And one of the things I remember, as a CTO, one of the things I'm always looking at is how do we digitize the process, right? Like, how do we take something that's clunky and strip away all the incidental complexity so that we can focus on the things that are truly necessary for both the customer and for the business. And I remember going to title and escrow. I don't know if you even know what those terms really mean, other than paperwork that you have to sign when you buy and sell a home. But I remember going to some of these places to understand how it's actually done. And in my mental model, actually coming out of these places, it's like almost like 20 fax machines chained together with people kind of checking off certain boxes and then manually scanning and faxing to the next place. It's just so backwards. And by the way, you would think that home ownership is one of the staples of what it means to be American, and title and escrow processes should be have been figured out, and it's a smooth process. But if you look at a title officer, the escrow officer, every single person's doing things slightly differently, which kind of blows your mind. So there's just a ton of room to make not just the customer experience 100 times better, but also just make the logistics and the operations, really the foundation of real estate, a ton simpler and more efficient. But yeah, I agree with you. There's there's a ton of complexity and opacity, and it's been really exciting to try and light that match in darkness, as you said.
I mean, to paint a picture and not to go too far into the details, but when I sat down at escrow to purchase, the paperwork had the wrong unit number. I'm like, I mean, you're like, how is this possible? I don't even know how this is, still a thing. And, meanwhile, the one thing that has changed the process for sure is things like DocuSign and HelloSign and digital signatures is huge, because you can just hammer away on your phone and then go in to sign in person. But back to the technology piece to this, it's like, there's so much of the process that is just like really clunky and outdated and again, untransparent. But also it's not just like going through the process, it's the process of buying and selling that you don't know what the market is dictating. Like there's times to sell, there's times to buy, there's seasonality, there's all sorts of things that go into it. You're at the whim of your agent, who may or may not be really talented. I mean, like there's so many factors, and your agent who, it's like, we used to talk about this in the military where, the person who's doing the training, spend an hour reading all the material the night before and then trains you the next day, sometimes. But it's the same thing. You could have a real estate agent that, walked into the job, 6 days ago, but they still know more than you. Or you could have someone that's been selling the same neighborhood for 35 years that, it's like, oh, I've sold that house three times, or, whatever it is. So there's just so much variance. And when you're in a field where you want zero variance, you want to minimize variance when you're making the biggest purchase of your life, like that's all really bad stuff. And things like data science can get to some of the truth, the answers to those questions.
Yeah. And so absolutely, I think at the end of the day, it's about making the process, making the buying and selling journey for consumers really easy, right? Our goal at Opendoor, if you take a step back, is just to provide super simple, seamless, and safe ways for people to sell a home, buy a home, and trade in home. And so the APIs that we want to present to the customer should be very straightforward. If you want to sell, here's an option available to you. Like here's literally a price that you can get anytime you want from opendoor.com. So that's the ability to sell to us directly. And I'll just highlight too, just to make sure we have the menu of options that we provide out there. We have the sell direct option that we launched with a company 6 years ago. And actually, we launched a new product recently called the Home Reserve that actually I think worked really well for you, Ian. And that what we do is we would actually buy your next home for you, all cash, using Opendoor's cash. And then you will live in that home, and then we'll help you list your current home, which at that point will be empty and safe for people to have tours in. And so it's a really elegant trade-in product where you get to buy your next home, all cash, which is more competitive, and you get to list your home, and you get to really try and fetch top dollars for that listing. So that's what we call the Home Reserve program. And the third set of products that we really focus on are for our buyers. So we've applied a lot of the same principles around simplicity and certainty, and given our home shoppers the ability to tour any home in the market. For Opendoor homes, you get to do self tours, and for homes on the market, we have a network of agents that connect our tour assistants and actually can do virtual tours on your behalf. So our goal is to give this suite of products for homeowners and home shoppers so that it's way easier to buy or sell a home. But yeah, there's a ton of data science and other technology that make that experience possible. I'll give you one example. For us to be able to say, hey, Ian, here's the offer on your home, and we're able to transact literally within the next week if you'd like to, we have to understand housing in a super deep way. We have to collect a ton of data about properties across this country, and then we have to develop the right machine learning techniques, the data science techniques to get the most out of that data to predict what that home is really worth. And there's a ton that goes into that. But one of my favorite stories, and I'll pause here after telling this story because I love it, and kind of tells you to your point about, you have agents that are kind of fresh out of agent school, if you will, and really awesome experienced agents. One of the things that you look at when you're in data science, you're like, okay, what is the fundamental uncertainty with this prediction problem? And so we sent two appraisers to the same property. And we said, okay, tell us about your opinion of value for this home. And we did enough of those to realize, wow, there's massive variance in terms of what a list price should be if you ask two realtors to quote the same home. So there's a ton of, just to your point, opacity and variance. And one of the great things with data science is that you actually get to leverage the data sets to tell you what really is the most accurate answer as to what the price of a home should be.
I mean, you are preaching to the choir on the first of all, on all of this, but I'm glad you brought that up because as someone who just went through many,
did they line up?
I can tell you that you're going to be surprised to know that they did not. That it was all over the place, and that had an appraiser show up, ask for the check to be paid. Had my realtor write it on the hood of her car. It's like, I need the check in hand before I do the appraisal. Didn't go into either of the bathrooms. It's just stuff like that. Now, did it matter at all in the end of the day? This particular time it didn't, but in other cases it sure would have. And it's wild. It's a wild thing. My dad was actually an insurance inspector for many years, so I have the other side of this in my family. To know what it means to be an appraiser or to be or an inspector or something like that. It's a hard job. It's not saying that it's an easy job, but that is not what you want your entire financial future on, is to say one person's opinion who, just had a bad day, right? That's truly what can happen.
Yeah. And the range of outcomes could be pretty significant for people. So, I think one of the nice things about using data is you really try and triangulate from a lot of data points on what we think, what the data is saying is, here's the most probable sale price for the home. And that just gives me and gives the company and our customers so much more confidence that, hey, this is a more rigorous way of arriving at a price.
So one of the things that specifically here in our sunny Bay Area happens all the time is, you have competition, you have multiple bids, you have multiple offers. And that is what truly drives these monster home prices is you walk in and it's multiple people are like, this is where I want to be, right? Houses have that effect. How do you look at things like that? Because that does differ based off of street or location or, a new kitchen or all those things.
Yeah, it's a great question. It's something that we spent a lot of time thinking about. I think first off, it's really important to gather as big of a data set as we can about housing. And one of the really hard things about building this pricing capability with an Opendoor is that we're dealing with a super heterogeneous asset class. Homes can differ greatly block to block, right? Literally within a block, home by home sometimes. So it's really important for us to gather all the right data about a house. And so we actually spent a lot of time not only ingesting a ton of data that's off of public records or off of certain data feeds, but we spent a great deal of energy going full stack, so to speak, and actually going out to the home and collecting that data ourselves. And so we spent a lot of energy collecting that data, and that gets down to building the right tool. So one of the most interesting things about building vertical companies like Opendoor from a technology standpoint is that you really have to get down to the lowest detail, right? So, I literally just came out of a conversation with one of our engineering managers about how we're building this new tool that allows our inspectors to really easily configure the types of inspections that are appropriate for a region, because sometimes certain homes need a certain checklist of things to inspect versus other areas. So we have to get down to that level of detail around actually building our own inspection apps to capture the right data for a given house. And then on top of that, homes also are heterogeneous over time. Like the same home that sold today or yesterday might have a different close price, to your point of seasonality, 2 years ago and 2 years from now. And so we also have to do a ton of just time series analysis to what I call time travel, like help understand what this home was worth back then and what this home might be worth a few months from now, which is when we would resell it. But a lot of that requires first not being afraid to collect really good high fidelity data, and then coming with the algorithms that know how to interpret that data. Some of the hardest things that we have to solve are, how do you turn that feeling that you get when you get into a home of your dreams, right? Like the sunlight's shining a certain way, the layout feels great, the quality of the countertop feels amazing, right? Like how do you turn some of these sensory signals into more quantitative factors that could then be used by algorithms? So we actually spend a lot of efforts with computer vision, actually with a lot of crowdsourcing techniques. Oftentimes we have human in the loop style machine learning algorithms that give us the supplementary data to make our algorithms really accurate. But it's a fascinating topic, and I can talk about this for a very long time.
Well, yeah, let's keep unpacking that, because this is absolutely fascinating to me. I mean, like I would imagine that, if you take a picture of, black mold, it's like, hey, this is a no-go property or whatever, I don't know, whatever it is, that there's maybe certain things on the list that are like, hey, this is a, no-fly zone for us or something like that. But there's also things that like presumably absolutely change the impact of, a house. For example, the new kitchen, right? It's like you can buy the home. I just did this, so I know you can buy the Home Depot kitchen for X amount of dollars. And a lot of times it isn't the difference between, or it's a huge difference, because it could be the difference between multiple offers, which would drive the price, or it could be the difference between 0 offers and one offer, which is the ultimate binary thing. And so things like that, a lot of realtors, the best realtors, just kind of know anecdotally, hey, I know I can keep my costs. I can do this kitchen. I can do this backsplash. I can get my lamps at Lamps Plus. I can do all these things. But nobody is aggregating this, to my knowledge. Like there's nobody that is saying the report of like, hey, if you do the all white kitchen with with the subway tile and Lamps Plus lighting and silver fixtures, like that is a 17% increase in offer price.
Right. Yeah, it's really a tough problem, and no one's really collected this data at scale until I think maybe us. We've done literally hundreds of thousands of inspections at this point. And so we have a really rich data sets of literally, like, God knows how many millions of photos we have at this point of houses. But yeah, you're right. So when we look at a home, yes, there are going to be, to your point, the no-fly zone things. So if there are foundation, like really just structural foundation issues, sometimes we have to have a pretty tough conversation around, hey, like what would it take to actually fix this, and let the homeowner know that. But then there are other things are much more subjective. Like what renovation should we do? Like the countertop that you were talking about, or the kitchen. I mean, the appliances, the flooring, the paint on the wall, the carpet that you use, the certain layout. Like layout is actually one of the hardest things to quantify, because unlike, say, appliances, you can't say something as simple as a stainless steel, is it black and white? With HVAC, at least you can say, well, this is like a 3-year-old system, a 10-year-old system. Should it, is it end of life? Does it need to be repaired? With layout, is actually much more subjective. Does it feel open? Is it too open? Does it feel claustrophobic? Right? Like those are the things where you really have to lean on having a lot of data. You have to lean on being able to parameterize a layout, or at the very least, get multiple opinions from people from a crowdsourcing fashion, so that you can at least put a number to it that you can then use in your algorithms. And by the way, sometimes what's been interesting is we've actually just fed raw computer images to the algorithm with some of the newest and greatest algorithms, And it kind of picks up like curb appeal, which has been really fun to see. Like, oh, this home is like, why is this home more expensive than than other algorithms suggesting? You look at the front of the home, and say, oh yeah, it's a pretty home.
Well, it's funny, like when you've been doing this, for about a year as a buyer, like I was doing. I mean, as soon as it comes on, your platform of choice, you're like, oh, that's going to be a hot home. Like for sure. Yep. It's like, oh, you have, whatever, white picket fence, bay window, whatever it is, as soon as you see those, you're like, that's going to fly off the proverbial shelves, because it just, it has, good curb appeal or whatever it is. And so I would imagine that like the top of the hot homes are probably, or potentially like easier to pattern match, and maybe the bottom of the bottom, but it's like seems like there's a million shades of gray in between those two things that have so many intricacies.
Yeah, and that's where, going back to what we said about using data science versus leading on human kind of judgment, for some of these homes that have a special feature, that's where appraisers can really struggle, and actually normal kind of human judgment could be, it's really tough to assess.
Yeah. I mean, unconscious bias and stuff like that. I mean, like there's so much, there's so much unconscious bias that happens with that sort of thing. I couldn't even imagine.
A lot of what we were doing at Opendoor, if you think about trying to validate this really custom asset class like a housing, in many ways, Opendoor is an extension of trends in finance and technology over the last, call it 50 to 80 years. If you think about actually credits, right? If you think about a loan, what people were trying to do in the 20s and 30s when loans were first introduced was, how do I actually model a person's ability to pay back a loan? And a human being is even, it's the most custom of them all, right? And actually, the introduction of FICO scores was a way to actually make the process more rigorous. Because back then, depending on the loan advisor's day, you could get a different loan, and there was just a ton of subconscious biases that were happening, with lending. And one of the nice things as you bring more data to the fold is you get to make more objective decisions. And that's one of the things that I hope we've been able to do at Opendoor is, hey, here's a fair market value offer for your home. And we stand by the fact that we believe it's the most rigorous, most accurate way of finding out what your home is worth.
So can you talk about, like, are you building all this stuff in-house? Like, is this all your team's building this? Do you use other like vendors and things like that? Are you using like white label stuff? Like, how are you making sense of all this data?
Yeah, so the buy first build question is always a really key one for CTOs and someone who's trying to make sure that we're making the most out of our resources. But the philosophy has always been buy commodity and build proprietary. So there are going to be data sets that we can buy that we shouldn't collect on our own. And so we do that. Like, for instance, recorder data and assessor data, that's a whole industry where people are literally going to county offices, getting digital copies or sometimes physical copies of that, setting it over to a place where people are literally transcribing it into a form and then sending us kind of the clean data. That stuff, let's just buy off the shelf, because that's not something that we want to build from scratch. But on the other hand, the algorithms and the additional layer of data insights, like the inspection app, like our ability to operate our supply chain super well, that's kind of core to what we have to do, right? So those are the things where, along with the customer experience, how do we actually maintain trust with a customer over the period of weeks? Like, that's actually really tough product engineering challenges that we've had to overcome. And so for those things, yeah, they're proprietary, and we spend a ton of energy making sure they're done right.
And then what about the data capture? You kind of touched on it a little bit, that there's a bunch of different sources, but like, are you just putting in massive amounts of unstructured data? Like, how are you capturing this? And is it just like, a gal walking in there and snapping 1,000 photos? Like, what are you doing?
Yeah, so it's a mix of structured and unstructured, but for the most part structured. So that's why we have to spend a lot of energy actually connecting all the different points in our operations. Because when we have to price a home, like I mentioned, we really have to understand holistically that home, that neighborhood, all the transactions that have happened around it, how the market is trending from a macroeconomic level. And so we are trying to capture as much structured data as possible. For instance, what's the quality of the countertop? And, it's the stainless steel versus black and white appliances. There are some more unstructured things that we look at, like photos. But again, we try to turn them into more structured data so that the algorithms can use it. But that's where a lot of the magic happens is, how do you take a look at, say, homes that you're not able to make an accurate prediction on? And then you ask yourself, like, why did we miss from a backtesting perspective, how did we miss this prediction? And then you realize, oh, wow, like there was this golf course, that neighbors this home. And then you have to go out and, figure out all the golf courses in Phoenix. Or maybe, wow, this home was on a really slanted slope and that really, took away value from that home. So then we have to either do a lot of geodata processing to understand topography of the different cities, or when we go out and inspect a home, make sure that our inspector through our apps are instructed to tell us about the slope of the driveway or something like that. So it is a mix of structured and unstructured data, but we spend a lot of time thinking through how do we get as much structured data as possible for the algorithms.
You got a creek bed behind it. There's power lines. And the other thing with all of this that's so crazy is that it's the biggest financial decision of your life. Buying homes is just really hard in general. And then you also have the financial component, which is like going through getting a loan is really the hardest part for a lot of people, right? Just the actual lending process is horrific. And lots of paperwork and lots of things you don't understand, and you're signing the life away. And look at how many people still foreclose anyways. So it's like this convergence of, I've kind of, discussed at length here, like how difficult it is, but it really is so many environmental decisions. And then you do all of that and you buy the house and you don't realize that the way that it gets afternoon sun means that your snow never melts. It's like, oh, great, we have afternoon shade. Our snow literally never melts. And we have an icy sidewalk, which we have to scrape because the city, because it's our property. And if somebody falls, we're liable. There's just so much complexity and so many different data points that there's almost no way that a human could get it right. Or at least it feels that way.
Yeah, totally. I think that, you touch upon two things that are interesting there. One is financing, and the other one is like really understanding a home from a shopper's perspective. So financing, absolutely, it's super scary to, give all those documents to a loan officer and, make sure that you got everything covered and you can get the best loan or product you can. And, they're working with your title and escrow officer and your agent, and there's a bunch of paperwork being bounced back and forth, and you don't really know how all that works. So, one of the things about Opendoor philosophically is like we want to be full stack. And so in order for you as a shopper to have a really seamless experience, we actually went and built a mortgage company. It's called Opendoor Home Loans. And so the idea is that actually by being full stack, and by the way, we acquired a title and escrow company as well. So the idea is like, if you want to buy a home, our goal is it should just be a few clicks, right? It should be very similar to Amazon with a checkout flow. Okay, maybe it's not like 5 minutes, and maybe it's, you're not buying a thing for $10, but more like, $250K. But the flow itself shouldn't be that different, right? Like the complexity shouldn't be in how you navigate this checkout flow, but it should be about, hey, is this the right choice for you and your family at this point in your lives? So that's kind of the first reaction when you said about, financing. And the other thing that came to mind when you're talking about the story about, the afternoon shade and the icy sidewalk, one of the things that I think is really stressful, especially buying in the Bay Area or just generally, is, wow, you feel like you only have so many minutes at home before you have to make this massive financial decision. And it just feels really out of whack in relation to the time spent understanding if this is the right thing to buy and the consequence it has for you financially and for your lifestyle. And so one of the things that we have at Opendoor is this notion of a self-tour. Because we own the homes in our different markets, we actually made an app for shoppers. And if they want to visit our home, it's self-tour. So you come up to it, We do identity verification. We know through geofencing that you're close to the home. And we know that there's no one else in the home because we have sensors and whatnot in the home. And we can actually unlock the door for you. And you can choose to spend 5, 10, 30 minutes in a home really understanding it if it's a right place for you. You can come back multiple times a day. And we have had shoppers say this is one of the most important features of buying with an Opendoor home, because you get to come back to and really understand if it's right for you. And for homes that are not on our, that we don't own, we have a network of touring assistants that can help capture more information for you over multiple times a week, so that you can really get a picture of, in the afternoon, to your point, the snow doesn't melt.
It's such a backwards process. And as we've articulated here, like, this is a huge, huge problem. And like, if, as a, son of somebody whose family went bankrupt, like, I can tell you, it ain't fun. And it's something that, like, I think, is super important. And it's, people, you can kind of believe home buying is never for you, or it's not part of the American dream, or whatever it is. But for a lot of people, they want to own a little piece of dirt in the good old US of A. And that's super important. And I think it's just cool to hear the work that you all are doing.
Yeah. I mean, 2/3 of Americans still live in a home that they or their family owns. So it's still the majority of, majority of Americans, home ownership is the primary form of residence. And yeah, like, technology has really, so far, not made a huge dent. Something earlier you said was, has it changed, in the last 80, 100 years? Not really. And one of our hopes is that we can use technology to make it so much easier for people to sell and buy and trade in their next home.
Well, it really reminds me of, like, kind of the turning data into doing thing, like turning, information into insights. I feel like now we have a lot of information, but we don't have a lot of insights, right? Like, okay, I can go look at the average sale price in about 35 seconds for, like, the neighborhood that I live in. But, like, A, that's a trailing metric. B, it's not something that is predictive on a house by house basis. Like, it's really not. And so, and like, you have, estimates and things like that. And it depends on where you live, but that can, it can just widely, fluctuate. And so, it's just not something that I think most people, again, like, you do it because you do it and you get through it, but that doesn't mean that it ever feels comfortable. And I don't know if you have any, data on that, of just like the, scale of 1 to 10, people buying homes not using Opendoor. Like, how was your process? What would you rate it? I mean, I cannot imagine that there's anyone that is, like, over a 5 unless you've done it a couple of times.
I mean, we survey customers all the time on exactly what you're talking about. And it's commonly cited as one of the most stressful things, top 5 most stressful moments in people's lives. And it's like, behind, like, death of their parents. It's like crazy. We're talking about a transaction here. And I think one of the things that brings a lot of joy, honestly, to what we do at Opendoor is, hey, we get to really, in some ways, redefine people's relationship with the largest asset that they have in their lives, right? Like, what if you can view your home not as a liability, but as an asset? And if you can actually change that perspective, how might that help people reimagine what's possible in the future? Right? It's not like, oh my God, I have to sell this thing in order for me to move to this other place. No. Like, we can take care of that for you, right? Like, just focus on what's right for you in this moment, and focus on what's right for you and your family for the next 5 or 10 years. And we'll help you get there. And that's been really cool. And honestly, I think it's really just extrapolating the trends of finance and technology, which is, finance in many ways is about giving people more economic empowerment, giving people more geographic mobility. And technology is about data science, being able to build these capabilities to price well, to do logistics super efficiently, to build a great customer experience, and to do that at scale. And we combine both these ideas and trends in finance and with technology, you arrive at a company like Opendoor that, hopefully, to your point, it has been a very stressful thing for people to do. hopefully we can make that a lot less stressful and in fact, hopefully seamless. And over time, like it's not a big concern for people.
Has there been one thing that was especially difficult or a roadblock that you ran into?
There's so many. The company is 6 years old at this point, and I've been here for every second of it. I mean, I think every year there's a distinct challenge. Journey to build something from literally just three of us around a table in Potrero Hill, all the way to, I guess now everyone's remote. But there's been so many challenges. I mean, in the early days, I remember in year one, like honestly, the first few months, it was like, hey, is this something that people want? Right? Is this just a conjecture that we have that isn't really going to stick? And that was year one. It's like, hey, how do we make sure that we have product market fit, and this is really something that people truly wanted? And then the next year was, okay, is this like a one-trick pony? Is there something special about Phoenix that makes that set of customers receptive to Opendoor? Like, how do we de-risk that proposition that maybe this is a one-trick pony? And then the third and fourth and fifth and sixth year has been around, how do we scale to more markets? How do we make sure that we have really strong unit economics? How do we make sure that we're not just serving homeowners like sellers, but also serving buyers? How do we actually increase the number of ways we can serve sellers beyond just selling to us directly? How do we help them list a home? And this home reserve program that I just talked about. So there's been a ton of challenges because when you're in a startup from day one, like there are all these moments where it feels like it's an existential crisis where, wow, like the people want Opendoor. And honestly, it's a collection of really tough moments. But at the same time, you have a great team and you just bond together by figuring out how do we constantly just not be afraid of some of these really hard questions and innovate, build, talk to customers your way out of these hard problems and deliver solutions for them.
Okay, let's get into our lightning round. These questions are fast and easy, just like the Salesforce Customer 360 platform, the number one cloud platform for digital transformation of every experience. We've been talking about the home buying experience needs to change. Well, everybody is worried about experience, and that's why you go to the Salesforce Customer 360 platform. Check them out. Go to salesforce.com/platform to learn more lightning round questions. Ian, are you ready?
Yeah, let's do it.
Number one, what app on your phone is the most fun?
I'm a Twitter addict, but in these remote work days, I have this app called Future Fit, which just connects you with a personal trainer, and they give you like these exercises you do every day, and it's kind of keeping me sane when I'm stuck at home for so long.
Who is your favorite famous Ian?
Oh man, he's a controversial one. Ian Fisher. He's a statistician, very famous one at that. Did a lot of work around experimentation and was considered one of the fathers of statistics. That was a very geeky answer.
You got me on that one. And I consider myself an Ian connoisseur.
Yeah, there you go.
Tough to be the most famous Ian because Ian McClellan is a national treasure.
Yeah.
Global treasure, really, I should say. Have you picked up any new habit while you're sheltering in place?
Well, there's cooking, but I will say actually sheltering in place and remote work has had some really positive benefits when it comes to forcing you to have good documentation practices or communication practices with your team. So it's actually forced a lot of us at Opendoor to be much better at writing things down. So I actually find myself spending a lot more time putting energy and thought into writing good documents.
What do you do for fun?
Recently, it's been because I used to play basketball and go out for runs. It's a little harder now, but I've been doing a lot more hikes in the Bay Area. There's just so many beautiful trails around here. So I did one last weekend in the East Bay. There's just some gorgeous redwood trails there.
I did Garin Park last weekend, so.
Yeah, the Redwood Regional Park.
Oh, yeah.
That was super nice.
I grew up doing cross country in Redwood Regional, so it was a horrible cross. I would walk a lot, but hanging out in the outdoors. I grew up like down the street from there, so I'm sure this is not interesting at all to our thousands of listeners who are spread over the world. But if you ever get a chance to check out the wonderful Oakland Hills, it's a great place. Okay. What is your best advice for a first-time CTO?
Oh, that's a tough one. I was the first-time CTO when I started the company. And it's a trying process, but I will say it's a mix of strategy, execution, and people. Obviously, it starts with the people. You have to make sure that you're there and present for your team, and you have to be super empathetic and make sure you're supportive of your staff, who are ultimately the ones really doing the frontline work. Then it's about developing your chops around making sure everything is just operating nicely in terms of execution. But I would say the part that I didn't fully appreciate it when I first founded a company is, aside from all the code and the career development of your staff, is how do you make sure you're working with your executive team to really understand the strategy of the business and then translate that to the roadmap for tech. And I would say really focus on people, execution, and strategy kind of in different buckets, and making sure that day after day and week after week, you're making progress on each of these three categories.
What question do you never get asked that you wish you were asked more often?
Oh my goodness. What is most underrated in data science? Because one of the things that I was a data scientist. I don't do as much data science anymore. Obviously, I work with a lot of data scientists, but I would say that there was this fascination with the word science, and there's a lot of fascination with terms like artificial intelligence and machine learning. And I actually think a lot of that stuff is commoditized. It's actually not that difficult in the grand scheme of things. If you think about machine learning from an API perspective, you're talking about literally .fits and .train, or rather .fit and .predicts. It's just two APIs. And people spend a ton of time obsessed over the methods behind them. But I think what's much more exciting is thinking about, like, how do we apply this data-driven approach to different business settings? Like, I actually think operations research is vastly underrated. Like, Lyft and Uber, these ride-sharing companies, are completely built upon operations research. And it's actually taking these algorithms, actually applying it in business that's interesting. So I would say that, for folks that have an interest in data science, I think it's important to not get caught up with the terms of data science. It's really just about how do we make sure that you're making the right data-driven decisions backed by algorithms for your business. And those algorithms could be complex, could be simple, and there are many types, but don't get too hung up on exactly how those algorithms work.
Fascinating stuff. That we'll bring you back on the show, and we'll just talk data science the whole time, because I'm sure our listeners would dig. We haven't really, I think it's been like 100 episodes since we did a data science one. So yeah, we'll have to bring you back.
Right on.
Well, Ian, you have a great name and you've been a great guest. Thanks so much for joining today. Any final thoughts? Anything to plug?
No, it's been really fun chatting. I hope that your listener took away a few things, and if folks want to check us out, we're at opendoor.com.
Yeah, when you start selling in the East Bay, I'm telling you, beta tester number 1. Let me know.
I'll hold you to that.
Sounds good. Thanks again.
Thank you.
IT Visionaries is created by the team at mission.org and brought to you by the Salesforce Customer 360 platform, the #1 cloud platform for digital transformation of every experience. Build connected experience, empower every employee, and deliver continuous innovation with the customer at the center of everything you do. Learn more at salesforce.com/platform.